Have you ever felt like you're just skimming the surface, unable to make real progress on the important things in life? What if you could break free from the constant distractions and finally tap into your full potential? Imagine a world where you're not just busy but truly productive, where your focus becomes a superpower. In today's fast-paced digital world, deep focus seems almost impossible, but it might be the very key to standing out and succeeding. How can you train your mind to concentrate and get more done in less time? Let's dive into Cal Newport's deep work to find out how mastering this rare skill can completely transform your life. Chapter 1. Deep work is valuable. In a world dominated by constant notifications, social media updates, and a barrage of information, it's easy to get lost in the noise. Most of us spend our days shuffling between emails, meetings, and shallow tasks that barely require any real focus. We live in a culture where busyness is often mistaken for productivity, and where multitasking has become a badge of honor. But deep down, there's a nagging feeling that something is off. Are we really getting anywhere with all this chaos? Or is it simply that we're spinning our wheels without making any real progress? Cal Newport's deep work doesn't just pose these questions, it offers a solution. He introduces the concept of deep work as the antidote to the overwhelming distractions that rule our lives. Imagine, for a moment, being able to focus entirely on a task. No distractions, no multitasking, just you and the challenge at hand. Newport calls this deep work, the ability to concentrate without distraction on a task that pushes your cognitive limits. It's the type of work that produces real value. Deep work is the kind of focus that lets you solve complex problems, create something meaningful, or master a new skill. It's not about simply completing tasks or checking off items on your to-do list. It's about doing work that matters, work that will have a lasting impact. In today's knowledge economy, where success is determined by the ability to learn quickly, produce high-quality work, and innovate, deep work is more valuable than ever before. Yet, despite its value, deep work is rare. Think about your own life for a moment. How often do you actually get the chance to work deeply? For most of us, deep work is constantly interrupted by emails, phone calls, or the lure of social media. Even in the office, where focus should be encouraged, distractions are everywhere. Open office plans, constant meetings, and the pressure to be available at all times make deep work feel like a distant dream. But Newport argues that deep work is worth fighting for. Those who are able to cultivate this rare skill will be the ones who thrive in a world that is increasingly automated and competitive. He points to examples of individuals who have mastered the art of deep work and used it to achieve extraordinary success. Take Carl Jung, for instance. In the 1920s, Jung was faced with the monumental task of developing his groundbreaking theories in psychology. But to do so, he needed to retreat from the distractions of the outside world. He built a stone tower in the woods, where he could isolate himself and focus intensely on his work. The result? Some of the most influential psychological theories of the 20th century. Newport isn't suggesting that you need to build a tower in the woods to master deep work, but he is suggesting that it requires a deliberate effort to carve out time and space for focused, meaningful work. The challenge lies in creating an environment where deep work can flourish, despite the distractions that surround us. The first step, Newport argues, is recognizing the immense value of deep work. It's not just a way to be more productive. It's a way to produce work that is truly valuable and fulfilling. Imagine being able to dedicate hours of uninterrupted time to a project that excites and challenges you, knowing that each hour is moving you closer to mastery. That's the promise of deep work. But before we can dive into the methods for achieving it, we need to understand why deep work is so rare in the first place. Before we continue with the next chapter, please show some love by hitting the like button so we can create more videos for you. Chapter 2. Deep work is rare. As we delve deeper into Newport's insights, we come to a critical realization. The reason most of us struggle to engage in deep work is that our society is not designed to support it. Everywhere you look, distraction reigns supreme. The very technologies that were supposed to make us more productive have instead become the greatest sources of interruption. The constant ping of notifications, the temptation to check social media, and the always-on mentality of modern work environments have created a perfect storm for shallow work to thrive. Newport doesn't sugarcoat the truth. Deep work is rare because the modern world makes it difficult, if not impossible, to focus for long periods of time. The structure of many workplaces actively discourages the kind of concentrated, uninterrupted effort that deep work requires. Think about the last time you were in a traditional office setting. How often did you have a meeting scheduled in the middle of a task? How many times did you hear your email ding while you were trying to focus? Or maybe it wasn't even a person or device pulling you away. Sometimes our own minds are the worst culprits. We've trained ourselves to constantly switch tasks, to respond to every little distraction as if it's urgent. Newport highlights this cultural shift toward valuing busy work. Tasks that make us look productive but actually prevent us from doing anything meaningful. Responding to emails, attending endless meetings, and engaging in workplace politics might make us feel important in the moment, but they rarely lead to high-impact results. The rise of open office plans is another example of how modern workplaces sabotage deep work. While they're designed to foster collaboration and transparency, these environments often do the opposite when it comes to focus. Newport describes open offices as breeding grounds for shallow work, places where interruptions are the norm and focus is nearly impossible. The result is a workforce that is constantly distracted, jumping from one shallow task to the next, never having the opportunity to dive into complex or creative work. Newport introduces the concept of shallow work as the antithesis of deep work. Shallow work refers to tasks that don't require much cognitive effort and can be done while distracted. These tasks are often logistical in nature, like answering emails, attending meetings, or filling out paperwork. They might be necessary, but they don't lead to breakthrough ideas or major progress. The problem arises when shallow work consumes the majority of our time, leaving little room for the deep work that truly drives value. As Newport points out, many people and organizations mistake being busy for being productive. The more hours you spend at your desk, the more emails you send, the more meetings you attend, the more productive you must be, right? But Newport challenges this assumption. He argues that true productivity isn't about how much you do, but about the value of what you produce. Deep work is where that value is created. It's where you make real progress on meaningful tasks, where you solve difficult problems, and where you develop skills that set you apart. The rarity of deep work is precisely what makes it so valuable. In a world where most people are constantly distracted, those who can focus deeply have a significant advantage. Newport provides an example of Nate Silver, the data scientist and statistician who became famous for accurately predicting the outcomes of U.S. elections. Silver didn't achieve success by working in the noisy, distracting environments that most of us operate in. He structured his work in a way that allowed him to focus deeply on his craft, blocking out distractions and dedicating time to analysis and writing. This ability to focus on cognitively demanding tasks without distraction was one of the key factors behind his success. The lesson here is clear. If you want to stand out, if you want to produce work that is exceptional, you need to cultivate the ability to work deeply. Newport argues that in the modern economy, there are two kinds of people who will thrive. The first group consists of those who can work creatively with complex machines, programmers, engineers, data scientists, and others whose work requires technical mastery. The second group includes those who are the best at what they do in any given field. Both groups share a common trait. They engage in deep work to develop their expertise and produce high-quality results. But how do you go from being constantly distracted to cultivating the focus required for deep work? Newport suggests that it starts with understanding just how much of your day is consumed by shallow work and distractions. Most of us don't realize how fragmented our attention has become because distractions have become so normalized. Newport encourages readers to take stock of their day-to-day activities and ask themselves, how much time am I spending on work that truly matters? And how much time am I wasting on tasks that could be considered shallow? The modern world may be filled with distractions, but Newport's message is one of hope. While deep work is rare, it's not impossible to achieve. With the right strategies and mindset, You can carve out time for deep work, even in a world that seems designed to prevent it. But before we can tackle the how, we need to understand why deep work is not only rare, but also meaningful. Chapter 3. Deep work is meaningful. Now that Newport has established how rare deep work has become, he shifts our attention to something even more profound: the meaning that deep work brings into our lives. There's something inherently satisfying about focusing intensely on a task, losing track of time, and eventually emerging with something tangible, something that truly matters. In this chapter, Newport digs into the psychology behind deep work and why it's not only valuable from a productivity standpoint, but also from a personal fulfillment perspective. Imagine the last time you were so absorbed in a task that hours passed without you noticing. Perhaps you were writing, painting, solving a challenging problem, or learning a new skill. During those moments, there's a sense of clarity and purpose that's hard to find in the hustle and bustle of daily life. This state of total immersion is what psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called flow, a term Newport references throughout this chapter. Flow is that sweet spot where your skills are perfectly matched with the challenge at hand, and you are fully engaged in what you're doing. Time seems to disappear, and your focus is laser sharp. Newport argues that engaging in deep work allows us to experience flow more often. But there's more to it than just feeling good. When you're in a state of flow, your brain operates at its highest level, allowing you to produce your best work. This is where you achieve breakthroughs, make creative connections, and push the boundaries of your abilities. It's the difference between simply completing a task and producing something that truly stands out. In a world filled with distractions, the opportunity to engage in deep, meaningful work is a rare gift. Newport draws from neurological studies to explain how our brains are wired for focus and why deep work taps into something fundamental within us. Humans have a deep need for craftsmanship, the desire to build, create, and improve. Whether it's a writer crafting a novel, a coder developing software, or an artist painting a masterpiece, there's an intrinsic satisfaction that comes from dedicating yourself to a complex, demanding task and seeing it through to completion. This is why deep work isn't just about getting more done. It's about experiencing fulfillment in your work. Newport highlights that many people in today's workforce are disengaged, dissatisfied with their jobs because they never have the chance to focus on tasks that challenge and inspire them. Instead, their days are filled with shallow tasks that leave them feeling unproductive and unfulfilled. The antidote, Newport suggests, is deep work. By carving out time to focus on high-impact tasks, you not only increase your productivity, but also find greater satisfaction in your work. To illustrate this, Newport shares the story of Adam Grant, one of the most prolific professors at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. Grant is known for his extensive research, teaching, and writing, yet he manages to excel in all areas without working around the clock. How does he do it? By embracing deep work. Grant dedicates uninterrupted periods to his research and writing, allowing him to produce high-quality work in a relatively short amount of time. When he's teaching or meeting with students, he's fully present. But when it's time to write, he retreats into deep work, shutting out distractions and focusing entirely on the task at hand. This balance between deep work and rest is key to Grant's success, and it's a lesson we can all learn from. Deep work isn't about working more hours. It's about making the hours you do work count. Newport emphasizes that engaging in deep work allows you to produce results that are both meaningful and fulfilling, whether you're writing a book, designing a new product, or solving a complex problem. The sense of fulfillment that comes from deep work also stems from the fact that it allows us to develop and refine our skills. Newport explains that deep work is a form of deliberate practice, focused, effortful work that stretches your abilities and pushes you to improve. It's the kind of work that challenges you, forcing you to operate at the edge of your comfort zone. This is where real growth happens. Over time, as you continue to engage in deep work, you become better at your craft, more skilled, and more capable of producing exceptional results. This concept of deliberate practice is a key theme in Newport's argument. He points out that many people spend their careers doing shallow work, which doesn't require much thought or effort. As a result, they never fully develop their skills, and their work remains mediocre. In contrast, those who engage in deep work are constantly pushing themselves to improve, and this leads to mastery. Mastery, in turn, leads to greater job satisfaction and a sense of purpose. There's also a philosophical dimension to Newport's argument. He draws on the work of philosopher Winifred Gallagher, who wrote about the power of focus in shaping our experience of life. Gallagher's research suggests that what you pay attention to defines your reality. If your attention is constantly pulled in different directions by distractions, your experience of life becomes fragmented and shallow. But if you focus deeply on meaningful tasks, your experience becomes richer, more coherent, and more satisfying. In this sense, deep work is not just about productivity, it's about living a more meaningful life. When you dedicate yourself to focused, purposeful work, you are investing in something larger than yourself. You are contributing to the world in a way that leaves a lasting impact, and in doing so, you experience a sense of fulfillment that is difficult to find in a world dominated by shallow tasks. As Newport brings this chapter to a close, the message is clear. Deep work is not just a tool for getting ahead in your career, it's a path to personal fulfillment. It allows you to tap into your full potential, produce work that matters, and experience the satisfaction that comes from mastering a skill or completing a meaningful project. In a world where most people are content with the surface level, deep work offers a way to go deeper, to create something lasting, and to find meaning in the work you do. Chapter 4. The Rules of Deep Work. As Newport moves forward in his exploration of deep work, he begins to shift from why it's valuable and meaningful to how we can actually achieve it. If deep work is so important, why do so many of us struggle to make it a part of our daily lives? The truth is, engaging in deep work is not just a matter of willpower. It requires a deliberate strategy, a set of rules, and a strong framework to build it into our routines. In this chapter, Newport introduces the 4 key rules that can help anyone cultivate deep work as a regular part of their life. The first rule is simple but powerful. Work deeply. At first glance, it might seem obvious. Of course, you need to work deeply to accomplish deep work. But Newport digs deeper, explaining that most people underestimate just how difficult it is to achieve sustained focus in a world full of distractions. Simply saying you want to work deeply isn't enough. You need to create systems and routines that support your ability to focus for long periods of time. One of the ways to achieve this is by creating rituals. Newport suggests that you need to develop consistent routines around your deep work sessions to minimize the amount of effort it takes to get started. It could be something as simple as setting aside the same time every day for deep work, or having a designated space where you go solely to focus. The point is to eliminate any friction that might stand between you and the deep work you're trying to achieve. Newport also highlights the importance of structuring your time in a way that supports deep work. He introduces the concept of time blocking, a method where you schedule every minute of your day. This might sound extreme at first, but Newport argues that when you plan your time down to the minute, you're less likely to fall into the trap of shallow work. Time blocking forces you to be intentional with your schedule and carve out specific blocks for deep work. Over time, these blocks become sacred, and you protect them fiercely from distractions. Of course, no amount of time blocking or ritual building will matter if you can't resist the pull of distractions. Newport's second rule, embrace boredom, tackles this issue head-on. In today's world, we're conditioned to seek out stimulation at every moment. Whenever we have a spare minute, we reach for our phones, scroll through social media, or check email. Newport argues that this constant need for stimulation has weakened our ability to concentrate. If you want to cultivate deep work, you need to train your brain to handle boredom.
How do you do this? By intentionally exposing yourself to boredom and resisting the urge to fill every idle moment with distraction. Newport suggests a technique where you use moments of downtime, such as during a commute or while taking a walk, to think deeply about a complex problem. The goal is to focus your mind on a single issue without letting it that require intense focus.
Newport also encourages readers to resist the temptation to constantly switch tasks or check notifications while working. Every time you give in to the urge to check your phone or respond to an email, you're training your brain to be more distractible. The key is to embrace those moments of discomfort when you feel the pull to do something else and push through them. Over time, this practice will strengthen your ability to focus and engage in deep work without needing constant stimulation. The third rule, quit social media, might be the most controversial. Newport doesn't mince words when he argues that social media is one of the biggest obstacles to deep work. He's not advocating for a complete rejection of all social platforms, but he does suggest that most people use them without considering whether they're truly beneficial. Newport invites readers to conduct a social media fast where they step away from all platforms for 30 days and evaluate the impact on their lives. During this time, Newport recommends reflecting on how social media actually contributes to your goals. Are you using it for entertainment, for staying connected, or for professional purposes? And more importantly, is it worth the cost of your attention and time? Newport believes that for many people, the answer will be no. He suggests adopting a more deliberate approach to social media, using it only when it directly supports your values and goals, and cutting out the rest. The idea here isn't to demonize social media, but to encourage a thoughtful approach to how we use our time and attention. Social media is designed to be addictive, pulling us into a never-ending cycle of updates, likes, and notifications. Newport's challenge is for us to reclaim control over our time and focus by being intentional about the tools we allow into our lives. The fourth and final rule is drain the shallows. Newport points out that most people's workdays are filled with shallow tasks, things like responding to emails, attending meetings, and performing administrative tasks. While some of these activities are necessary, they often consume far more time than they should. Newport suggests taking a hard look at how much of your day is spent on shallow work and finding ways to reduce it. One of the strategies he recommends is setting strict limits on the amount of time you spend on shallow work. For example, you might limit yourself to 1 hour of email per day, or block off specific times for meetings and phone calls. The goal is to minimize the time you spend on low-value tasks so that you have more time and energy to devote to deep work. Another key to draining the shallows is learning to say no. Newport emphasizes that deep work requires a significant investment of time and energy, and you can't do it if you're constantly saying yes to every request that comes your way. Whether it's a meeting, a new project, or a social obligation, saying no to things that don't align with your goals is essential for protecting your deep work time. As Newport wraps up this chapter, the message is clear. Deep work doesn't happen by accident. It requires intentionality, structure, and a willingness to push through discomfort. By following these 4 rules, you can create an environment where deep work becomes not just possible, but a regular part of your routine. The result is not only greater productivity, but a deeper sense of fulfillment and purpose in your work. Chapter 5. Execute like a business. Now that Newport has laid out the groundwork for how to cultivate deep work through his 4 key rules, he shifts focus to a crucial aspect of making it a long-term practice: execution. Deep work isn't just a mindset, it's a habit, one that requires a disciplined approach. In this chapter, Newport introduces a framework for ensuring that deep work is not only planned, but executed effectively. Borrowing principles from the business world, he outlines strategies that can help you treat your personal deep work the same way a successful business treats its key initiatives. First, Newport introduces the idea of identifying and focusing on wildly important goals. In the business context, these are the goals that, if achieved, would make everything else seem less significant by comparison. Newport argues that the same principle applies to personal productivity. If you want deep work to become a regular part of your life, you need to identify the few key outcomes that are most important to you. It's easy to get overwhelmed by a long to-do list or feel pulled in 100 different directions, but Newport insists that true progress comes from focusing on a small number of high-impact tasks. These wildly important goals should be specific, measurable, and directly tied to deep work. For example, if you're a writer, a wildly important goal might be completing a book manuscript by the end of the year. If you're a researcher, it could be publishing a certain number of peer-reviewed articles. By defining these goals clearly, you give yourself a target to aim for and a reason to dedicate time to deep work. Next, Newport emphasizes the importance of acting on what he calls lead measures, instead of focusing solely on lag measures. In the business world, lag measures are the metrics that show whether or not you've achieved your goal, like revenue or profit. But the problem with lag measures is that they only tell you the result after the fact. Lead measures, on the other hand, are the actions you take that lead to the desired outcome. For example, if your goal is to write a book, a lead measure would be the number of hours you spend writing each day. These are the things you have direct control over. In personal productivity, focusing on lead measures helps you stay on track with your deep work goals. Instead of worrying about whether you'll finish your project on time, a lag measure, you focus on the number of hours you dedicate to deep work each week, a lead measure. By tracking your lead measures and making sure you're hitting those targets, you can ensure that you're making consistent progress toward your goals. But how do you stay accountable to these goals and lead measures? This is where Newport introduces the concept of keeping a compelling scoreboard. In business, teams often use scoreboards to track their progress toward key goals in a visible way. Newport suggests applying the same principle to deep work. By creating a simple, clear scoreboard that tracks how much time you spend on deep work each day or week, you give yourself a visual reminder of your commitment. This scoreboard doesn't need to be complicated. It could be as simple as marking off days on a calendar or keeping a journal of your deep work hours. The point is to have a tangible way to see your progress, which can serve as both motivation and accountability. The final element of Newport's execution framework is creating a cadence of accountability. In the business world, regular check-ins or review meetings are essential for keeping teams on track. Newport suggests that individuals can adopt a similar approach to hold themselves accountable for their deep work efforts. This could be as simple as setting aside time each week to review your progress, reflect on what's working, and make adjustments if necessary. During these review sessions, Newport encourages individuals to ask themselves key questions. Are you meeting your lead measure targets? Are you spending enough time on deep work? Are there distractions or shallow work tasks that are eating into your deep work time? By regularly assessing your performance, you can ensure that deep work remains a priority and doesn't get pushed aside by other demands. Newport emphasizes that deep work isn't just a personal practice. It's a skill that can be honed and perfected over time. Just as businesses refine their strategies and operations to improve performance, individuals can refine their deep work habits to become more focused and productive. This process of continuous improvement is key to sustaining deep work in the long term. One of the key takeaways from this chapter is that execution is not passive. It requires ongoing effort, reflection, and adjustment. Newport argues that you can't just decide to work deeply one day and expect it to happen automatically. You need to put systems in place that make deep work a consistent, repeatable process. By treating deep work like a business initiative, complete with clear goals, measurable actions, and regular reviews, you can ensure that it becomes a core part of your life, rather than something you do sporadically. Newport also points out that this level of execution is what separates high achievers from everyone else. Many people have big goals and dreams, but few have the discipline to consistently work toward them in a focused, intentional way. Deep work is the key to bridging that gap. It's not about working more hours or grinding harder. It's about making sure that the hours you do work are spent on tasks that truly matter. As Newport concludes this chapter, the message is clear. Deep work doesn't just happen. It's something you have to build into your life through deliberate practice and disciplined execution. By setting clear goals, tracking your progress, and holding yourself accountable, you can turn deep work into a habit that drives both professional success and personal fulfillment. The question is, are you willing to commit to the process? Do you want to improve yourself daily? Subscribe to our channel now and get free audiobooks every day. Chapter 6. Be Lazy. At first glance, the title of this chapter, Be Lazy, might seem like a contradiction to everything Newport has advocated so far. After all, deep work requires focus, discipline, and effort. How does laziness fit into that equation? But as Newport dives deeper into this concept, he reveals that rest and relaxation are not just complementary to deep work, they are essential. In fact, true productivity and creativity depend on the ability to disconnect from work, recharge, and give your brain the space it needs to process and recover. Newport begins by explaining that our culture tends to equate productivity with endless hustle. We're encouraged to work long hours, stay constantly connected, and fill every moment of the day with something productive. But this approach, Newport argues, is fundamentally flawed. The human brain isn't designed to work at maximum capacity all the time. It needs downtime, periods of rest where it can recharge, consolidate memories, and generate new ideas. There's a growing body of research that supports this idea. Studies have shown that the brain continues to work on complex problems even when we're not consciously thinking about them. This phenomenon is known as diffuse thinking, and it often happens when we're engaged in activities that don't require much cognitive effort, like taking a walk, doing household chores, or even daydreaming. These moments of mental rest are when the brain can make unexpected connections, solve problems, and spark creative ideas. Newport draws on the work of several psychologists and neuroscientists to explain how this process works. When you engage in deep work, your brain is operating in what's known as focused mode, which allows you to concentrate intensely on a single task. However, this mode of thinking is energy intensive, and your brain can only sustain it for a limited amount of time. After a period of deep work, your brain needs to switch to diffuse mode, where it can process information in a more relaxed, less structured way. This is where being lazy comes into play. Newport argues that in order to engage in high-quality deep work, you need to deliberately build in periods of rest and relaxation. This isn't about slacking off or wasting time. It's about giving your brain the space it needs to recover and function at its best. Without this balance, you're likely to burn out, become less productive, and struggle to maintain the focus required for deep work. Newport emphasizes that rest doesn't have to mean doing nothing. It can involve engaging in low-stress, enjoyable activities that allow your mind to wander and recharge. For example, taking a walk in nature, reading a novel, or spending time with family and friends can all serve as forms of mental relaxation. The key is to disconnect from work and allow yourself to truly unwind. One of the most interesting points Newport makes in this chapter is that being lazy can actually improve the quality of your work. He highlights research showing that people who take regular breaks, get enough sleep, and engage in leisure activities are more creative, more productive, and less likely to make mistakes. When you give your brain time to rest, you're able to return to your work with renewed energy and focus, allowing you to perform at a higher level. Newport also touches on the importance of setting boundaries between work and leisure. In today's hyper-connected world, it's all too easy to blur the lines between the two. Many people check emails after hours, take work calls during weekends, or constantly monitor their phones for updates. But Newport argues that this constant connectivity erodes your ability to engage in deep work. When you're always on, your brain never gets the chance to fully rest, and as a result, your performance suffers. To counter this, Newport suggests adopting what he calls a shutdown ritual. This involves creating a clear, deliberate routine for ending your workday. For example, you might review your to-do list, organize your workspace, and set specific goals for the next day. The purpose of this ritual is to signal to your brain that the workday is over and it's time to switch into relaxation mode. By establishing a shutdown ritual, you create a psychological barrier between work and rest, allowing you to fully disconnect and recharge. Another important point Newport makes in this chapter is that leisure should be high quality. He differentiates between passive forms of rest, such as mindlessly scrolling through social media or binge-watching TV shows, and more active, engaging forms of leisure that promote mental rejuvenation. Activities like reading, exercising, pursuing hobbies, or engaging in meaningful conversations with loved ones are far more effective at helping you recharge than simply consuming media. In fact, Newport argues that high-quality leisure is a critical component of a fulfilling life. He points to the ancient Greeks, who believed that true happiness and fulfillment came from engaging in activities that required effort and skill, whether it was practicing a craft, participating in intellectual discussions, or pursuing physical fitness. These types of leisure activities not only provide rest, but also contribute to personal growth and well-being. Newport's message in this chapter is clear. Deep work is most effective when it's balanced with intentional rest and high-quality leisure. If you're constantly pushing yourself to work harder and longer without giving your brain time to rest, you're likely to hit a wall. But by embracing periods of laziness and making time for meaningful leisure, you create the conditions for sustained productivity, creativity, and fulfillment. As Newport brings this chapter to a close, he leaves readers with a crucial reminder. Deep work isn't just about working harder, it's about working smarter. And sometimes, the smartest thing you can do is step away from your desk, take a break, and allow your mind to rest. In doing so, you'll not only improve the quality of your work, but also enrich your life in the process. Chapter 7. The Philosophy of Deep Work. At this point, Newport has outlined the rules for engaging in deep work, provided a framework for executing it like a business, and emphasized the importance of balancing work with rest. In this chapter, he turns to the question of how to make deep work a fundamental part of your life, not just something you engage in occasionally. To do this, Newport presents a series of philosophies that you can adopt, each designed to help you make deep work a central element of your personal and professional routine. One of the first philosophies Newport introduces is what he calls the monastic approach. This is the most extreme form of commitment to deep work, and is inspired by the lives of monks who retreat from the world to focus entirely on their spiritual practice. In the context of deep work, the monastic approach involves isolating yourself from distractions for extended periods of time to focus on a single, high-priority task. Newport uses the example of Donald Knuth, a computer scientist who has adopted the monastic approach to his work. Knuth is known for his groundbreaking work in the field of algorithms, and part of his success comes from his ability to completely cut himself off from distractions. For example, Knuth famously doesn't use email. If someone wants to get in touch with him, they need to send him a physical letter, and he only responds after careful consideration. This level of isolation allows Knuth to focus deeply on his work, without the interruptions that plague most people's days. Of course, the monastic approach isn't feasible for everyone, especially if your job requires frequent interaction with others, or if you have multiple responsibilities. But Newport introduces it as a powerful example of how eliminating distractions can lead to extraordinary results. For those who can't fully commit to such isolation, Newport offers alternative philosophies. Next, Newport introduces the bimodal approach, a slightly more flexible philosophy for deep work. In this approach, you alternate between periods of deep work and periods of shallow work or social engagement. Newport uses the example of Carl Jung, the famous psychologist who would retreat to his stone tower in the Swiss countryside for weeks or months at a time to focus on his research. During these periods, Jung engaged in deep, uninterrupted work. But when he returned to his professional and social life, he was fully present, engaging with colleagues and patients. The bimodal approach allows you to experience the benefits of deep work without completely disconnecting from the world. The key is to schedule extended periods of time, days, weeks, or even months, where you can dedicate yourself fully to deep work, while balancing this with periods where you engage in more shallow work and social obligations. For those who work in professions that require a mix of deep and shallow work, the bimodal approach can be a highly effective way to achieve balance. The third philosophy Newport presents is the rhythmic approach, which is perhaps the most practical for people with busy schedules and multiple demands on their time. The rhythmic approach involves setting up a regular, predictable schedule for deep work that becomes part of your daily routine. Rather than retreating for long periods of time like in the monastic or bimodal approaches, the rhythmic approach integrates deep work into your everyday life in smaller, more manageable chunks. Newport suggests that the best way to implement the rhythmic approach is through time blocking, where you set aside specific hours each day for deep work and protect those hours from any distractions. For example, You might reserve 2 hours every morning for deep work, knowing that during this time, you won't check emails, attend meetings, or engage in any shallow tasks. The rhythmic approach works well because it creates consistency. When deep work becomes part of your routine, it's no longer something you have to actively plan or think about. It simply becomes a habit. Newport points to successful people like prolific author Neil Stephenson, who uses the rhythmic approach to manage his deep work. Stevenson writes every morning without interruption, often working for hours at a time. By maintaining this daily rhythm, Stevenson is able to produce complex, high-quality work without needing to completely isolate himself for long periods of time. The final philosophy Newport introduces is the journalistic approach. This is the most flexible of the four, but also the most difficult to implement successfully. The journalistic approach involves fitting deep work into your schedule whenever you have a free moment, much like a journalist who writes a story whenever they have a break in their reporting duties. This approach requires a high level of discipline and focus because it means switching into deep work mode at a moment's notice, without the luxury of a set schedule or extended periods of uninterrupted time. The journalistic approach is named after Walter Isaacson, a biographer and journalist who has written detailed, complex works on figures like Steve Jobs and Albert Einstein. Isaacson is known for his ability to transition into deep work whenever his schedule allows, even if it's just for a few minutes or an hour at a time. This approach can be effective for people with unpredictable schedules or multiple competing responsibilities, but it requires a strong ability to switch between shallow and deep work on demand. Newport acknowledges that the journalistic approach isn't for everyone. It demands an exceptional level of mental flexibility and discipline, and most people find it difficult to switch into deep work mode without some level of preparation or routine. However, for those who can master it, the journalistic approach offers the advantage of making the most of even the smallest windows of time. As Newport walks readers through these different philosophies, he emphasizes that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Each person's situation is different, and the right approach to deep work will depend on your specific circumstances, responsibilities, and goals. For some, the monastic approach might be ideal, allowing them to focus deeply on a single project for an extended period of time. For others, the rhythmic approach may offer the consistency needed to integrate deep work into a busy schedule. The important thing, Newport argues, is to choose a philosophy that works for you and commit to it. Deep work doesn't happen by accident. It requires intentionality, structure, and discipline. By adopting one of these philosophies, you can create the conditions for deep work to flourish, regardless of the demands of your life. Newport closes this chapter with a reminder. Deep work isn't just about improving your productivity. It's about creating a life that is more meaningful, more fulfilling, and more aligned with your values. The philosophies he presents are tools for achieving that balance, helping you make time for the work that matters most and ensuring that you're not simply reacting to the demands of the world around you. Chapter 8. Be intentional with your attention. In this chapter, Newport dives deep into the idea that our attention is one of the most valuable resources we possess, yet it is often squandered on distractions, shallow work, and trivial tasks. This chapter explores how we can reclaim control over our attention and direct it toward deep, meaningful work. Newport's argument is simple but profound. By intentionally managing how we allocate our attention, we can significantly improve the quality of our work and, ultimately, the quality of our lives. The modern world is designed to fragment our attention. Think about your typical day. How often are you interrupted by emails, instant messages, or phone notifications? How frequently do you find yourself switching between tasks, never fully engaging with any of them? For many people, the day is a blur of interruptions and multitasking, with little time for focused, uninterrupted work. But Newport argues that this constant fragmentation of attention is not just a nuisance. It's a serious obstacle to doing deep work and achieving high-level results. Newport opens the chapter by describing how our brains work when it comes to attention. Neuroscientists have found that the brain can only focus on one task at a time. When we try to multitask, we aren't actually doing two things at once. Instead, We're rapidly switching between tasks, which creates cognitive overload and reduces the quality of our work. The more we split our attention, the more shallow our thinking becomes, making it nearly impossible to dive deeply into complex problems or creative projects. But the issue goes beyond just multitasking. Newport points out that even when we think we're focused, our attention is often scattered. For example, you might be working on a report, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking about an upcoming meeting or checking your phone for a text message. These micro-distractions, small breaks in focus, can have a significant impact on your ability to engage in deep work. The good news, according to Newport, is that we can train our brains to focus more effectively. Just like a muscle, attention can be strengthened with practice. The key is to be intentional about where we direct our attention and to eliminate as many distractions as possible. Newport argues that the most successful people are those who have mastered the art of managing their attention and can dedicate long stretches of time to deep, focused work. Newport offers several strategies for reclaiming control over your attention. One of the most effective ways to do this is by creating a distraction-free environment for your deep work sessions. This means removing all potential sources of interruption, whether it's turning off your phone, closing your email, or finding a quiet place to work where you won't be disturbed. By setting up an environment that supports deep focus, you can minimize the chances of being pulled away from your work by distractions. But managing your attention isn't just about eliminating external distractions, it's also about controlling your internal state. Newport suggests that one of the biggest challenges to deep work is our own minds. Even if we remove all external interruptions, our thoughts can still pull us away from the task at hand. We might start worrying about a deadline, thinking about a personal issue, or daydreaming about something unrelated. These internal distractions can be just as damaging to our focus as external ones. To combat this, Newport encourages readers to practice mindfulness and develop the ability to direct their thoughts intentionally. One of the techniques he recommends is what he calls productive meditation. This involves using moments of downtime, like walking, exercising, or commuting, to focus on a specific problem or task. Instead of letting your mind wander, you use these moments to think deeply about a particular issue, training your brain to stay focused even when you're not actively working. Another technique Newport highlights is attention residue. This concept refers to the idea that when you switch between tasks, a portion of your attention remains stuck on the previous task, which makes it harder to fully engage with the new one. For example, if you're writing an email and then immediately switch to working on a report, part of your attention will still be focused on the email, which reduces your cognitive capacity for the report. The more frequently you switch tasks, the more attention residue builds up, making it increasingly difficult to focus deeply on any one thing. The solution, Newport argues, is to minimize task switching and create blocks of uninterrupted time for deep work. Instead of jumping from one task to another, you should batch similar tasks together and focus on them in dedicated time slots. For example, you might set aside an hour in the morning for email and administrative tasks, and then reserve the rest of the day for deep work. By grouping similar tasks together, you reduce the cognitive load that comes from switching between different types of work and allow your brain to stay focused on a single task for longer periods of time. Newport also touches on the importance of embracing boredom. In a world where we are constantly stimulated by our phones, the internet, and other forms of digital media, many people have lost the ability to tolerate boredom. But Newport argues that boredom is actually a powerful tool for deep work. When you allow yourself to be bored, when you resist the urge to check your phone or distract yourself with social media, you train your brain to stay focused for longer periods of time. This is especially important for deep work, which often requires sustained concentration on a single task without the constant need for external stimulation. He gives the example of how some high achievers, like successful authors or entrepreneurs, deliberately schedule time in their day for rest or low-stimulation activities. This doesn't mean they're being lazy. It's actually a deliberate way to recharge their mental energy so they can return to their deep work with renewed focus. By taking breaks and allowing themselves to step away from their work, they can maintain the mental stamina needed for long periods of intense focus. Newport encourages readers to experiment with different ways of managing their attention, whether it's by scheduling regular deep work sessions, practicing mindfulness, or simply spending more time away from distractions. The key is to develop habits that support focus and minimize the constant fragmentation of attention that is so common in today's world. As Newport wraps up this chapter, he returns to the core message of deep work. Success in the modern economy isn't just about being busy, it's about being focused. In a world where distractions are everywhere, those who can master the skill of attention will have a significant advantage. By being intentional with your attention and making deep work a priority, you can unlock new levels of productivity, creativity, and fulfillment in both your personal and professional life. Chapter 9. Cultivating a Deep Life. As Newport moves into the final chapter, he shifts the focus from the individual tactics of deep work to a broader, more profound question. How do you cultivate a deep life? By now, Newport has made it clear that deep work is not just a tool for professional success, but a gateway to a more meaningful and fulfilled life. The closing chapter is dedicated to showing how deep work, when woven into the fabric of your daily existence, can help you live a life that is focused, intentional, and truly fulfilling. Newport begins by reinforcing the idea that deep work is about more than productivity. It's about creating the conditions for living a life that matters. In a world filled with distractions, shallow pursuits, and constant demands for our attention, the ability to work deeply and focus on what truly matters is a rare and precious skill. It's easy to get caught up in the busyness of life, to fill your days with tasks that feel urgent but are ultimately unimportant. But Newport urges readers to take a step back and ask themselves, what do I want to accomplish with my time? What do I want my life to stand for? For Newport, cultivating a deep life means aligning your daily actions with your long-term goals and values. It's about making deliberate choices that prioritize depth over shallowness, quality over quantity, and focus over distraction. The first step in this process is to take stock of your life and identify the areas where you are spending too much time on shallow tasks or distractions. Newport suggests conducting an attention audit, where you track how you spend your time over the course of a few days or a week. The goal is to get a clear picture of how much time is being dedicated to shallow work versus deep work, and to identify the areas where you can make changes. Once you have a clear understanding of how your time is being spent, the next step is to take action. Newport offers several practical strategies for cultivating a deep life. One of the most powerful strategies is the practice of draining the shallows. This involves ruthlessly eliminating or minimizing the shallow tasks that consume your time, but don't contribute to your long-term goals. For example, you might limit the amount of time you spend on email, reduce the number of meetings you attend, or delegate administrative tasks to others. The key is to free up as much time as possible for deep work and high-impact activities. Another important aspect of cultivating a deep life is setting clear boundaries between work and rest. Newport emphasizes the importance of establishing a shutdown ritual at the end of each workday. This involves setting a specific time to stop working, reviewing your tasks, and closing down your work for the day. By creating a clear boundary between work and leisure, you allow your brain to rest and recharge, which is essential for maintaining the mental energy required for deep work. Newport also encourages readers to be intentional about how they spend their leisure time. He argues that many people fall into the trap of passive leisure, mindlessly watching TV, scrolling through social media, or engaging in other low-quality activities. While there's nothing inherently wrong with relaxing in this way, Newport suggests that high-quality leisure, activities that are engaging, challenging, and fulfilling, can be far more rewarding. Whether it's learning a new skill, practicing a hobby, or spending time with loved ones, high-quality leisure contributes to a deep life by enriching your experience and helping you grow. One of the key themes of this chapter is the idea of intentionality. Newport stresses that living a deep life doesn't happen by accident. It requires conscious effort and deliberate choices. This means being selective about the commitments you take on, the people you spend time with, and the projects you pursue. It means saying no to things that don't align with your goals and values, even if they seem tempting or socially expected. By focusing on what truly matters and cutting out the rest, you create the space for deep work and deep living. Newport also touches on the importance of reflection and self-assessment in cultivating a deep life. He encourages readers to regularly take stock of their progress and make adjustments as needed. This could involve reviewing your goals, reflecting on your successes and challenges, and identifying areas where you can improve. The idea is to continuously refine your approach to deep work and ensure that you're staying aligned with your long-term vision. In this chapter, Newport also addresses the challenges and resistance that come with pursuing a deep life. He acknowledges that living deeply in a world that prioritizes speed, convenience, and distraction is not easy. There will be times when you're tempted to revert to shallow work, to give in to distractions, or to take on commitments that don't serve your higher purpose. But Newport reminds readers that the rewards of deep work, both personal and professional, are worth the effort. Ultimately, Newport's message is one of empowerment. He believes that anyone can cultivate a deep life, regardless of their circumstances or profession. Whether you're a writer, a teacher, an entrepreneur, or a parent, the principles of deep work can help you make the most of your time and live a life that is purposeful, fulfilling, and aligned with your values. As Newport concludes the book, he leaves readers with a powerful challenge. Will you choose depth in a world of shallowness? Will you prioritize what matters most and cultivate the discipline to focus on what truly matters? The choice is yours, and the rewards, greater productivity, deeper satisfaction, and a more meaningful life, are waiting for those who are willing to make the commitment. If you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed to our channel and especially like this video so we can make even better audiobooks for you.